Seraphine did not look back. She walked through the eastern gate of Blackmore Keep with nothing except the clothes on her back and the secret she had decided, somewhere between the great hall and the gate, she would carry alone. The night was cold, the kind of cold that had teeth. Behind her, the pack watched in silence. 300 wolves, standing still as stone, and not one of them said a word. Not one of them stepped forward. She had loved these people. She had healed their sick children, and sat at their tables, and learned the names of their grandparents. And now they stood and watched her go the way people watch a fire burn down, with a kind of helpless relief that it is not their house. She did not blame them. She walked. The great hall had happened 2 hours before. Cale had stood at the head of the stone table with his jaw set and his eyes flat, and his voice carrying the kind of certainty that men like him used the way other men used weapons. Clean, efficient, final. Seraphine, Luna of Blackmore, charged with treason, with communication and conspiracy against this pack, with carrying letters to our enemy. He had placed the letter on the table between them. Her handwriting, her seal, her name, at the bottom, in ink she recognized, because she had pressed the pen herself. She had looked at the letter, then she had looked at her husband. He had already decided. She could see it. The verdict was already written somewhere inside him, had been written before he called her into the hall, before the letter was even placed on the table. The accusation was a ceremony. He had needed a ceremony to make himself feel clean about a decision that had nothing to do with treason. She understood then. She understood everything. She did not speak. She did not explain. She reached up and unclasped the Luna mark from her collar, the small silver wolf, the one he had placed there himself on the night they bonded, and she set it on the stone table between them, gentle as setting down a sleeping child. Then she walked out. She was 3 weeks past the border when she understood she was not alone inside her own body. She sat with this information for a long time, in a small room above a bakery in a town called Veldon that did not appear on any Blackmore map. She sat with her hands flat on her stomach, and she thought about what Cale would say if he knew. She thought about the pack. She thought about the letter, and about the things she knew that had made the letter necessary, and about Cale's father, and about the agreement that had been made before she was ever brought to Blackmore at all. Then she stopped thinking about Cale. She thought about the child. She thought, this child will not grow up afraid of the man who should love him most. She thought, this child will know what he is worth before anyone tells him otherwise. She stopped running, and she started building. 7 years. A midwife in Veldon. A safe house in the border mountains. A woman who had once been a Luna, learning to be something else. A healer, a trader, a quiet person with steady hands, and a son who watched everything, and said very little, and understood, with the unsettling intelligence of a child raised close to hard things, exactly who he was. His name was Elian. He had her stillness, and the lost wolf king's eyes, dark gold, the color of amber held up to late afternoon sun. The lost wolf king had been Seraphine's first arranged meeting, years before Cale, a political introduction her family had orchestrated, and then abandoned, when the Blackmore offer came. He had died in a border conflict 2 years into her exile. She had heard about it through traders. She had sat with the news very quietly, and then gone to check on her son, who was asleep, small and warm, his breath even. She had not cried. She had stopped expecting the world to give her things worth keeping. Elian grew up knowing 2 things about his father. First, that he had been good. Second, that goodness had not protected him. The boy filed this information away and said nothing, and grew steadily into the kind of child who made adults nervous in the best possible way. On his 7th birthday, he told his mother, "We have to go back." She had looked at him across the kitchen table. "The borderland packs are sick," he said. "I heard the traders talking. They said it has been getting worse since last winter. They said no one is helping them." He paused. "I think I'm supposed to help them." She had wanted to tell him he was 7 years old, and supposed to do nothing except grow. Instead, she had looked at him, really looked, and seen the thing she had been quietly watching take shape for years. A king. Patient and certain in the way her husband had never been, because her son's certainty did not require anyone else's silence to survive. She said, "All right?" The eastern gate of Blackmore Keep looked exactly the same. This was somehow the most disorienting thing. Seraphine had expected the world to have changed shape around her absence, and instead, it had simply waited, enormous and indifferent, with the same stones and the same iron and the same cold wind coming off the mountain. The gate guards saw her and stopped. All four of them. 4 seconds of complete stillness, and in those 4 seconds, she watched them run through the same process. The face they knew, then the years they were trying to map onto it, then the recognition, and then the question they had no training for. She did not help them, she waited. Lady Seraphine, one of them finally said, and the title came out wrong, too old, like a word in a language no one had spoken in a long time. I have business with the Alpha King, she said. Tell him I'm here. They told him. Cale heard her name and put his hand on the windowsill. Not for balance, just to have something solid under his palm. He had rehearsed this moment. Not intentionally, it had happened without his permission, in the dark, during the years when sleep came late or not at all. He had imagined what she would look like, what she would say. He had written himself speeches, carefully, in the privacy of his own head, speeches that were honest and accountable and mature. He had been, in these imagined versions, quite impressive. Now, from the upper corridor, he looked down into the courtyard and saw her standing next to a child, and every word of every speech fell out of him completely. She looked the same. She looked entirely different. The difference was not in her face. It was in the way she stood, the way she held the ground beneath her feet, like a woman who had stopped asking the world for permission. Then he looked at the child. The child was looking back at him. Dark gold eyes, the color of amber held up to light, and a gaze that was far too direct for someone his size. Cale understood. Not slowly, not in pieces, all at once, like a door opening onto a room he had not known existed but recognized immediately. The Lost Wolf King, the letter, the arrangement his father had made before Cale ever took the throne, the reason Seraphine had never explained herself. She had known what the letter was for. She had known what she was carrying, and it was not treason. His father had sold her, not to an enemy, to a bloodline, to an arrangement that required a child of 2 royal lines, raised in exile, away from politics, away from anyone who might want to use him before he was ready. His father had used Seraphine to complete the arrangement, and when the letter was discovered, when it was brought to Cale as evidence, she had looked at him and understood that he would not believe her, and she had made a choice. She had not explained. She had protected the child. Cale stood at the window for a long moment, then he went downstairs. They met in the entrance hall. Not the great hall. He had made sure of that. Seraphine, he said. Alpha King, she said. The titles sat between them like furniture neither of them wanted. He looked at her and felt the full weight of 7 years pressing down on the back of his throat. He wanted to say 30 things. He said none of them, because she was not looking at him the way he had expected, not with anger, which he had prepared for, not with grief, which he thought he deserved, but with a kind of clean, empty patience, like a room that had been cleared out and swept and left open to the air. This is Elian, she said. The boy stepped forward and looked up at him with those amber eyes. You have a very big house, he said. Bigger than it needs to be, I think. Cale looked at the child. He did not know whether to laugh or sit down on the floor. I think so too, he said. The boy nodded, as if this confirmed something he had suspected. The borderland packs arrived within the week. 6 delegations, from 6 territories that had been suffering for 3 winters. A sickness in the soil that was killing crops. A weakness in the pack bonds that came with hunger. Children who were not shifting properly because they were not eating properly, and adults who were making desperate choices because there was nothing left. They came to Blackmore because the heir of the Lost Wolf King had sent word. A 7-year-old boy had sent word, through traders who went where pack messengers did not, and the borderland packs had come, because the Lost Wolf King had been, in his short life, the only person who had ever cared about their territories without wanting something from them in return, and his son, apparently, had inherited that quality along with his eyes. Cale watched Elian sit at the long table in the council room, small in the enormous chair, feet not quite reaching the floor, and listen. Truly listen. Not performing patience, not waiting for his turn to speak. Actually taking in what was being said, turning it over, letting it settle before he responded. He asked questions that made the delegation leaders look at each other. He said things like, "What did you need that nobody gave you? And what did you try that almost worked? And, if I gave you resources without conditions, what would you use them for first?" By the second day, 3 of the delegation leaders were crying, and not because things were bad, because someone had asked. Cale sat in the corner of that room and felt something he did not have a clean word for, not pride exactly, because the boy was not his, closer to grief, but not grief either, closer to the specific feeling of a man who has understood, very late, the distance between the leader he was and the leader he should have been. He looked across the room at Seraphine, who was sitting against the wall with her hands in her lap, watching her son with the quiet expression of someone watching something they built catch the light for the first time. She felt his gaze. She did not return it. On the 5th evening, Cale found her in the eastern courtyard. She was sitting on the low stone wall near the gate, looking at the mountain. He sat down at the opposite end of the wall, not close. He understood, now, the importance of not presuming. For a while neither of them spoke. "I know why you didn't explain," he said finally. She said nothing. "My father made an arrangement. You knew that if you explained the letter, I would have wanted to stop it. I would have interfered. And Elion needed to be born outside the politics, outside the pack, without anyone trying to use him." He paused. "You protected him." "Yes," she said. "You protected him from me too." This was the hardest sentence he had ever said out loud. It was also the truest. She looked at him then, just briefly, just a moment, and in that moment, he saw something shift behind her eyes. Not warmth, not forgiveness, but an acknowledgement, a recognition that he had, at last, understood the shape of what he had done. "He told me to come back," she said. "I want you to know that. I did not come back for you." "I know," he said. He believed the borderland packs needed him. He was right. "I came because my son asked me to, and because he was right, and because after 7 years, I am still not able to say no to him when he's right." Cale looked at the mountain. "He gets that from you." She almost smiled. He saw it, the beginning of it, the small movement at the corner of her mouth, and then it was gone, and she was looking at the mountain again. The confirmation ceremony was held in the great hall. Cale stood at the head of the stone table. The same stone, the same hall, where he had placed a letter between them, and called it evidence, and watched her walk out. He stood there, and he told the truth. He told it plainly, without softening it, without finding elegant language to make it sound like something other than what it was. His father's arrangement, the letter, the banishment, what he had not understood, and what that had cost. What Seraphine had carried alone for 7 years, and why. The pack was very quiet. He confirmed Elion as heir of the Lost Wolf King. The borderland delegations acknowledged him. The boy sat in the front and received it all with a gravity that made him look, for a moment, years older than he was. After, he found his mother and took her hand. He did not say anything. She looked down at him and squeezed once. That was enough. She left the following morning. She was not running. She had places to be, obligations in Veldon, a life she had built that did not disappear because she had come back to this one for a week. Elion would be trained here. She would return. She was not leaving in the dark this time. She was leaving through the front gate, in daylight, with her head level. Cale found her at the gate. He had no speech. He had learned, finally, the cost of speeches that were built to make the speaker feel better. "I know you're not here for me," he said. "No," she said. He nodded. "I would like the chance," he said, "to become someone worth coming back for." She looked at him. A long look, the kind she used to give him when they were new, before the politics, before the great hall, back when she had believed that his certainty was a kind of shelter, and not a closed door. She looked at him, and he did not look away. Then she walked through the gate. The sun was behind the mountain. The cold was the kind that had teeth. Her footsteps were steady on the stone. He stood at the gate and watched her go, and for the first time in 7 years, he did not know what came next. He stayed there anyway.